Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be doing another update on the 2028 presidential election. And we are going to go through 8 candidates from each party, and we're going to start with the Democrats. So first up we have Gavin Newsom, and he is the current governor of California. He's been doing a lot of outspoken things against the Trump administration, and he's been going to different primary states to raise voters' awareness about his candidacy. And he has a high-profile platform, and he's got significant fundraising abilities, and I think he would do well in the primary. We would give him a 7 out of 10, but then in the general election, I do not think he would fare well because the Republicans would run attack ads and they would call him a California liberal, which that image is not popular amongst the majority of the country. So overall, he's a 5 out of 10. Now we go to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is on the progressive side of the party, and she is a representative from the state of New York, and she's a very influential figure in the progressive movement, and I think Democrats will go for something very progressive in 2028, which is why I give her 8 out of 10 primary odds. But then in the general election, I do not think she would do as well because she would be considered too far left for the general election, and her progressive policies would alienate moderate voters and make her an easy target to Republican attacks. Now, Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg currently lives in Michigan, which is a swing state, which that would be a huge thing if he could deliver Michigan. And he's a very skilled debater and a very good communicator, and he's served as mayor in a red state, Indiana, and he's been in the military. And I think he could do a pretty good job appealing to the Democratic base because they are going to want someone very charismatic like him. And then in the general election, I think he'll do well. I think he'll be good for getting those Rust Belt states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But I don't know how well he would fare in states like Georgia or North Carolina because he is not very popular among black voters. Now, Josh Shapiro, he is the current governor of Pennsylvania, and he is very popular in Pennsylvania, which is a swing state, and I think he would be a similar guy to Pete Buttigieg, someone from the Midwest, but I don't know if he is much different than Buttigieg. I think some voters may see him as too moderate, and in the general, I think he would do well in the general because he's a pretty moderate Democrat and very popular in the swing state of Pennsylvania, which would increase his odds to win the general election. Now, Kamala Harris. She recently announced that she is not running for governor of California in 2026, which means it is very, very likely that she will run for president in 2028. And she would be the person with the highest name recognition because she ran in 2024 and she was the vice president to Joe Biden, which gives her an automatic advantage in the primary. But I don't know how thrilled voters would be to have her again. And in the general, I really don't think she would do well because it's going to be very hard for her of overcoming her past election loss and her perception of her as part of one of the previous administrations I do not think would go well. Now, Gretchen Whitmer, she is the current governor of Michigan. She won in 2022 by 11 points, and Michigan is a swing state, so that's a very impressive margin. And she has demonstrated her ability to win voters in a divided state, but she's somewhat moderate, so I don't think she would do great in the primary, but she would do better in the general election because she knows how to win some voters from the other side of the aisle, and it has a reputation for being a very competent and pragmatic leader. And now Andy Beshear. Andy Beshear is the governor of Kentucky, a very red state, and that shows his ability to really appeal to voters across the entire political spectrum. And he's very moderate, so I don't know if he would fare well in the Democratic primary, but in the general election, I think he would do very, very well. He has this focus on like down-to-earth kitchen table issues, and his moderateness could be a significant asset in the general election. And now Raphael Warnock, he is a U.S. Senator from Georgia, and he can win in the swing state of Georgia, which he did in 2022. He was a pastor, which gives him a very powerful speaking ability, and he has a very strong connection to the black community, and I think he would do well in that southern area around Georgia. And I think that would set him up for a good shot at the presidential election, because he would definitely win states like Georgia and North Carolina, because they have a very high percentage of black population, which I think would help him very much. And now we go to the Republicans, and we are starting with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance definitely has a very, very, very big advantage in the primary, because he is the current sitting vice president. He has the highest name recognition, and the vice president usually becomes the front runner once their party's president is term limited. And I think he would definitely win the primary if he ran in the primary. But in the general election, I don't think he would do well, because he would try to appeal to the Donald Trump base, but he's not as Trumpy as Donald Trump. And he previously has underperformed Republicans nationally, like in his Senate race in Ohio, and I think he would be seen as the establishment candidate because he is the vice president, and I think he wouldn't do the same strength at appealing to the populist wing of the Republican Party like Trump could. And now Marco Rubio. He is currently the Secretary of State and was a senator in Florida, and he has experience in foreign and domestic policy, and he seems like a traditional conservative, so I think he would be next up to win the primary if J.D. Vance did not run. And he's very conservative guy. He's not too on the Trump wing of the party, because he ran against Trump in 2016 for the Republican nomination, but I think he would do okay in the general election. Now, Tulsi Gabbard. She used to be a Democrat, which gives her a unique political background, and that could appeal to some independent voters, and she has a very anti-interventionist foreign policy views that could resonate with some of the Republican voters. But again, she was a Democrat, and I don't think that's going to fare well in the Republican primary. But she could maybe do slightly better in the general, just because she's got that both sides of the political spectrum. But I really do not think she is the one for this, and I do not think she would do well in the primary or the general. Now we go to Ron DeSantis, who is the governor of Florida, and he has the ability to win in Florida by a very large margin, and he can appeal to most of the conservative base, and he's got this combative style, which I think he would do okay in the primary. He ran against Trump for the nomination in 2024, but ultimately lost. But his performance in the primary showed he had difficulty connecting with voters on the personal level, which means I do not think he would fare well in the general election. And now we go to Glenn Youngkin, who is the current governor of Virginia. Virginia is a blue state, and he is a Republican governor, which he has the ability to win both sides of the aisle, and he could be a potential successful general election candidate, but he must win the primary first. And some of Youngkin's positions are somewhat moderate, and that might not do well in a very Republican primary. But in the general election, I think he would do well, because he has this focus on education and economic issues, and he could do well appealing to suburban voters. Now, Nikki Haley, who ran against Trump in 2024 for the nomination. She was sort of the anti-Trump candidate, but then ultimately ended up backing Trump. And she's very popular with moderate Republicans and is a decent debater. But again, she's moderate, which would not go well in a Republican primary. But it would do better in the general election. And if she wins the primary, I think she's got a pretty good shot at winning the general election. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy is a very, very skilled debater and communicator. and he is very charismatic, and he has this ability to articulate a very strong conservative message. And I think he would do well in the primary. Donald Trump really likes Vivek, and he has this ability to generate lots of media attention. But I do not think he would do well in the general election because he's seen as very conservative and has some very unpopular policies and stances, and he has no experience, and his previous presidential bid in 2024 did not go well, and that could be a major liability for him. And now, finally, we have Greg Abbott, who is the current governor of Texas, and he is very supportive of Trump. He's very conservative. Recently, he called a special session in Texas so that they could redraw the legislative maps to favor Republicans in the 2026 midterms. And he would do well because he is a big supporter of Trump, and I just don't think he would do that great in the primary because I don't know if he's much different than other Trump Republicans. And then in the general election, I do not think he would do well because I doubt the country is going to want a Trump again, and that gives him a low chance of doing well. And so now we've gone through 8 candidates from each party, and there's some notable people like Gavin Newsom, who is already raising his profile, going to South Carolina and other primary states. And then Andy Beshear, who is very moderate and could do very well in the general election. And then Pete Buttigieg, who could win the election by solely relying on the Blue Wall Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And then J.D. Vance, of course, the current vice president, most likely to be the Republican nominee, and if not J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe the video, and I would love for you to comment. I would love to hear your thoughts, and have a great rest of your day.